This is a continuation of the reading of the book by Richard Hoskins called War Cycles, Peace Cycles. As this content is related to the broader scope of understanding macro and geopolitics, I felt this to be appropriate to include as part of the Interchain FM podcast. Enjoy. Section 5, Return of Usury to the West. Chapter 14, Return of Usury to the West, Maranos. The Saracens conquered Spain as they had Sicily. They conquered the Jews who lived there among the Christians. These Jewish captives easily adopted the religion of their conquerors and became honored and respected members of the Mohammedan community and married freely into their ranks. The Arabs pushed on over the Pyrenees Mountains into France, where they fought a large Christian army at Tours. They lost this hard-fought battle and were forced back into Spain. The Spanish Christians had not surrendered when the Mohammedans swept through Spain, but waged a holy war against the infidels from strongholds left to them in the mountains. These wars lasted for centuries. Over the years, the Spanish Christians gradually beat the Mohammedans back and reconquered the land of Spain. Again, as in the case of Sicily, many of the Saracens and Jews remained. This again presented the Christian rulers with the problem of the conquered aliens. The law still required, "Ye shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you. If ye will not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, those which ye let remain shall vex you." Numbers chapter 33, verses 52 to 55. Now give not your daughters unto their sons, neither take their daughters unto your sons, nor seek their peace or their wealth forever. Ezra chapter 9, verse 12. To keep their industries and estates provided with workers, efforts were made to convert these aliens into Samaritans and bring them into the Christian community. This caused the other prohibition to be violated. "A bastard shall not enter the congregation of the Lord. Even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of the Lord." Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 2. About 250,000 of these Jews who had lately been Mohammedans easily switched their faith to Jesus. These new converts were called Maranos. In time, all restrictions were removed from these new converts, and they were accepted into the Christian congregation of God with open arms. In spite of holy and canon law, some Maranos married into grandee families, the highest families socially in Spain. The Catholic Church had long had restrictions against such things. The Second Council of Orleans in 533 AD, Clermont in 535 AD, and Orleans 538 AD all prohibited intermarriage of Jews and Christians. Violators were excommunicated. The canon law was based on Scripture. "I am the Lord thy God, which hath separated you from other people." Leviticus chapter 20, verse 24. "So shall we be separated, I and thy people, from all the people that are upon the face of the earth." Exodus chapter 33, verse 16. When they heard the law, they separated from Israel all the mixed, quote, mongrel multitude. Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 3. Many of these new converts became priests. Some even became bishops and archbishops. The law forbidding such things was forgotten. When the tabernacle is to be pitched, the stranger, Hebrew for zur, racial alien, that cometh nigh shall be put to death. Numbers chapter 1, verse 51. "Thou shalt appoint Aaron and his sons, and they shall wait for their priest's office, and the stranger, zur, that cometh nigh shall be put to death." Numbers chapter 3, verse 10. "I have taken your brethren to Levites from among the children of Israel. Thou and thy sons shall keep your priest's office, and the stranger that cometh nigh shall be put to death." Numbers chapter 18, verses 6 to 7. "Let them make them broad plates for a covering of the altar, to be a memorial unto the children of Israel, that no stranger, which is not of the seed of Aaron, come near to offer incense before the Lord." Numbers chapter 16, verses 38 to 40. "They went in and stood beside the brazen altar. And the Lord said unto him, Set a mark upon the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations. And to the others he said, Go ye and smite, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary." Ezekiel chapter 9, verses 2 to 6. From 1449 on, the Maranos took over high society and finance. Some were confidants of the king. The Maranos became powerful and arrogant. they owned and ran Spain, they also became indiscreet by letting it be known that they were not really Christians. The king formed the Inquisition to investigate the matter. Their findings came like a thunderbolt. The Marranos were holding Jewish religious services while pretending to be Christians. This had been going on for generations. The reports had been true. Blue blood. Based on the prohibition of bastards, or mixed breeds, the Spanish at long last attempted to right matters by instituting the limpieza de sangre test, or test for purity of blood. The Jews were considered bastards for two reasons. First, they could not pass the blush test, since they were kinsmen to the dark-skinned Turco-Finns who had immigrated into Spain from southern Russia over the prior 5 centuries. Next, they had interbred extensively with their former Mohammedan rulers and other groups closely affiliated with and kin to these same Turco-Finns. The Spanish test, limpieza de sangre, to determine who was a mixed breed and who wasn't, was easily administered. It was merely a form of blush test. One simply raised one's sleeve where there was no sunburn, and if the blue veins were visible, it meant that one was a blue blood. If you were a blue blood, you were neither a Marrano, Moresco, or other mixed breed. This was all there was to the world-renowned test of blue blood. In 1492, the Marranos were expelled from Spain. Many went to Arab countries and became violent anti-Christians. Some went to Spanish and Portuguese possessions in the New World. Others went to Holland where, according to the Universal Jewish Encyclopedia, page 433, the return of the Marranos to Judaism in a free Holland signified the casting off of the oppressive shackles, meaning Christianity. Still, others went to England where they pretended to be Spanish Christians, and Englishmen didn't know the difference. The history of the Mohammedans closely parallels that of the Jewish Marranos. Presented with the option of conversion, expulsion, or death, many naturally chose conversion. The Jewish Marranos were expelled in 1492, and the Mohammedan Morescos were expelled in 1502. By 1510, Spanish authorities reported to the Pope that all strangers had been expelled from Christian Spain. This myth was exploded with the Moresco revolts that devastated Granada between 1568 and 1570. Spanish landowners wanted to keep Mohammedan laborers to work their lands. Consequently, it was only a question of time before the mixed descendants of Christians and Mohammedans formed a Samaritan population that worked its way into the government and church. They changed the outlook of the land, the church, and the complexion of Spain's population. The Christians of southern Spain did it their way. As in the case of Sicily and southern Italy, much of Spain was lost to her Christian conquerors, and much of the population resembled their kinsmen to the east, the Saracens. Chapter 15. Killing the King. In 1647, Oliver Cromwell was fighting a civil war in England and needed guns and supplies. To get them, he borrowed money at interest, and England was right back into it again. Cromwell contacted Jewish moneylenders in the Netherlands who were willing to make loans. There were 2 conditions. The first was that Jews be allowed into England. This was agreeable to Cromwell. The second condition was more delicate. The loans must be guaranteed. If large loans were made to Cromwell's government and King Charles II came back to the throne, the loans would be repudiated in an instant. The lenders would lose their money. In other words, as long as Charles lived, no loans could safely be made. Copies of letters are in existence recommending that Charles be given a chance to escape. His recapture would turn public opinion against him and would provide an excuse for his trial and execution. This is in fact what happened. An opportunity was presented to Charles. He tried to escape, was recaptured, tried, and beheaded. Regicide, the killing of the king. This is one of the earlier incidents in Western history of loan guarantees being ensured by the murder of a ruler, although the practice was common in the ancient world. Regicide is an integral part of the usury contract and is found wherever the contract itself is found. The list grows long as the years go by. Louis XVI of France was done away with in precisely the same manner 150 years later. Like Charles II of England, he had been deposed as a ruler. The real power lay in the revolutionary government, which had borrowed from the international bankers and was servant to them. In spite of this, however, no big loans could be made to this government as long as the king was alive and could possibly nullify them at a later date. Louis was given a chance to escape. He was given a large, conspicuous coach too heavy for his horses to pull rapidly, which would attract attention. There were 2 elegantly dressed gentlemen riding in advance, displaying gold coins to a hungry population. All this in time of revolution. Louis almost reached the border before he was captured. It made good copy for the newspapers. Returned under guard, he and his queen were condemned to die. They died well. The loans to the new revolutionary government were safe. Regicide. Napoleon Bonaparte was defeated and sent into exile. While he was gone from France, Jacob Rothschild negotiated large loans for the Bourbon, who had replaced him as the ruler of France. Napoleon returned to France and was defeated again at Waterloo. A near thing for the safety of the loans. Once more, he was exiled on a more distant isle. He died. A great monument was built in Paris for his body. A few hairs of his head were taken and recently analyzed. They contained arsenic. Napoleon had been poisoned so that he would never return and repudiate the loans made to the new government. During the war between the states, France tried to get her foot in the American door by sending Maximilian to Mexico as king. Mexico was the economic territory of the American Northeast banking cabal. This new king of Mexico was very popular with the Mexicans. In spite of this, when he was captured by the rebels, he was not imprisoned or ransomed and sent home. He was shot. He would never return to repudiate any of the loans made to Mexico's new rebel rulers. There was a hue and cry in the newspapers of the Northeast banking interests to execute the president of the vanquished Confederate States of America. For 2 years he was kept in a dark, wet, cold cell inside of an earthen bank in Fortress Monroe. He was an ill, broken man when put there. He should have died and was expected to die. When it was apparent that there were no way the ravished and occupied South, which was ruled by blacks, could ever revolt, he was released. As a precaution, laws were passed preventing him from ever holding office. Other laws were passed preventing white men from voting in the South. These laws were enforced by an occupying army. There was no way that the ex-president or the citizens he had represented could return to power to repudiate carpetbagger loans. Jefferson Davis was one of the fortunate few. He remained alive in spite of the nearly successful effort made to kill him. Nicholas II was Tsar of Russia. The communists took over. The lenders in New York made loans to the new communist government. To prevent him or any of his family from regaining the throne and repudiating the loans, the entire family was shot, even the little children. The loans were secure. Adolf Hitler was ruler of Germany. Germany lost the war. Losers are borrowers. Hitler knew he was earmarked for a showcase trial, and so he killed himself. Ex post facto trials were held for all the rest of the members of his government who might be looked on as his heirs. They were liquidated with few exceptions. Even the idealist Rudolf Hess, who tried to end the war between Christian nations by flying to England, was locked away permanently in Spandau prison by mutual consent of the victorious lenders. Occupying armies keep watch over the sanctity of the loans. The puppet government of today's Germany owes its existence to the occupying armies and leaves Hess in prison without a word of protest. The post-war German loans were guaranteed at Nuremberg. There is no one left alive who can rock the usury boat. Mussolini, the Italian leader, was executed for the same reason. The real rulers of Japan were the military leaders. They were executed, and the army and navy banned to keep any other military figure from arising to renounce the post-war loans. To this day, Japan has no army or navy worthy of the name. Her puppet government owes its power to its country's conquerors and keeps the country that way. Vietnam had a ruler. His name was Ngo Dinh Diem. American newspapers say that the Americans had him executed. He will never return from the grave to repudiate the recent loans made to the Vietnamese, North or South. Loan guarantees to nations involve regicide. There is little doubt that the recent assassinations and attempted assassinations of rulers here in America and elsewhere are connected with loan guarantees. The evidence will come to light in future years. It almost always does. Seldom do things happen by accident where usury is involved. Cromwell's loans. Charles I was beheaded January 9, 1649. Cromwell held meetings to discuss readmission of the Jews. Immediately, a distinctly hostile spirit emerged among the Christian merchants and clergy who united in opposition. To prevent an adverse vote, Cromwell dismissed the council. To change public opinion, Manasseh ben Israel, a large book publisher and a leader of the Holland Jewish community, published a book, Hope of Israel, in 1650. This book was given wide publicity among the fundamentalists of the time, the Puritans. This book advocated the entry of the Jews into England because it was said the Messiah could not come until the Jews were in all lands. England, it was maintained, was the only country which did not contain Jews. If the Jews were admitted, the Messiah might be expected. The Puritans bought the story. They forgot all about the biblical injunctions forbidding strangers to enter the land. Still, the larger part of the population of England was still against the admittance of the Jews. Cromwell took it upon himself to allow entry of the Jews quietly. He got his loans. The borrower is servant. By 1655, there were a considerable number of Marranos in England, secret Jews posing as Spanish Catholics. In 1655, England went to war with Spain. The Jews posing as Spanish Christians had to openly declare themselves Jews in order to avoid confiscation. This was also the year in which Charles II of England entered into negotiations with the same Amsterdam Jews against Cromwell to secure financing for his return. In 1655 and 1656, a horde of Jewish refugees from the Polish Ukraine arrived in Holland, putting further pressure on Manasseh ben Israel to force England open to immigration. In 1660, Charles II came to the throne. In addition to the loans which he had contracted with the Amsterdam Jews, he borrowed heavily from the local goldsmiths. In 1672, he repudiated the loans to the local goldsmiths, causing a general suspension of specie payment. Charles was disliked. Sometime about 1684, William III of Orange obtained a loan of 2 million gulden from Antonio Lopez Suazo, an Amsterdam Jew. This aided the Dutchmen to capture the English throne in 1688. The Jews again had an English ruler who was obligated to them, since the borrower is servant. This was the third in a row. Between 1700 and 1750, the Jews working their usury system in England increased their capital from 1.5 million to over 5 million pounds. In 1870, the University Test Act allowed Jews to enter English universities. In 1890, complete equality was granted to Jews in England. It had taken a long, long time.